Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Burke County Board of Commissioners pre-agenda meeting for Monday, March 3rd, 2025. Madam Clerk, all commissioners are present with the exception of Commissioner Burns. He was not feeling well and has decided to go home. Mr. Manager is present. Ms. Margaret. Mr. Attorney says he'll be here just momentarily, so we're going to carry on. Gentlemen, we have before us approval of the agenda. And let me ask that you make a couple notes there. I will remind everybody to silence your mobile devices. If you got any noise makers, please cut those off, and be sure to turn the microphone on when you come to the lectern today to make your presentations. Gentlemen, the couple changes to the agenda. Would like to remove decision item number 4, still working on some details with that budget amendment number 10. And would like to add consent item number 10, also a budget amendment that will be further explained during that time. So, gentlemen, if there's no concerns about that, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the agenda as amended to remove decision item number 4, budget amendment number 10, $849,691, and add consent item number 10, budget amendment number 10, $11,630.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. All those in favor signify by uplifted hand. 4-0. All right, presentations. Have several presentations today. First one comes on behalf of the Morganton High School Wildcat Alumni Association. And this is a donation from the school, and I'll refer to your package for that, gentlemen. You've had an opportunity to look at that. Any questions about that item? $500 donation from that group in recognition of our county folks during the Hurricane Helene and recovery process. Madam Clerk, anybody coming to present that during the meeting?
Yes, I think there'll be several members from the Alumni Association here at the regular meeting.
Okay. Any questions on this item? Seeing here none, I'll entertain a motion to leave this on as presented. Well, this item will be as without objection. Will be on the agenda. Sorry, gentlemen. Number 2, Mr. Manager, disaster recovery update.
Commissioner Britton, members of the board, good afternoon. I wanted to take just a moment to give you a quick update on all things Hurricane Helene and take an opportunity to answer any questions you all may have as we are really moving through this this tragic event, this disaster recovery process, and then ultimately to the extent that the board is willing and ready to give direction on our last couple of items. I'll try to facilitate some discussion about that and get some direction from the board, whether that's today or in 2 weeks, our regular meeting. I started just with a much more a higher level, more comprehensive review of the hurricane in Western North Carolina in totality to give some perspective. Roughly $350 million across 152,000 households has been received through the FEMA individual assistance. So remember, from a county perspective, we're working through the public assistance.
Excuse me, Mr. Manager, just gentlemen, you do have this in front of you in printed form if you want to look at it.
We've also seen transitional sheltering. We've experienced that here in Burke County, small business loans, and cumulatively across the 24 county region, about 3.7 million cubic yards of debris, which is just extraordinary. As you recall, we operated for I think over 60 days a disaster recovery center in Burke County that had about 3,500 total visits. When you look at the individual assistance program in Burke County, we had about over 13,000 folks register. About 59% of those had eligibility requirements that were met, and about $14.6 million has been awarded through those processes. On the housing assistance side, it was about a 9% award, or group of folks who were actually eligible, and about $4.2 million was awarded. And then, according to the most recent housing assistance program numbers, 24 homeowners had their property completely destroyed, and 18 folks who were renters had their primary dwelling destroyed.
Mr. Manager, when we say awarded, does that mean folks have money or that they should get money sometime?
They've received something, whether it's the full amount or not, I'm unsure, but like the 14.6, that's how much has been awarded. Whether they've actually received that cash or not, I don't have that data. But from what I've heard is after eligibility is awarded, it's pretty quick and you typically get it in a lump sum. So I would imagine the vast majority of that has actually been deposited into their accounts as part of the process. One of the biggest items that the county has been personally responsible for that we've intricately been involved in has been debris collection, primarily with the right-of-way, public right-of-way debris collection. We've facilitated that through, again, the public assistance program. We've used primarily 3 alternative debris sites, obviously the fairgrounds, our solid waste facility at Marsh Trail, and also at East Fleming. As of today, we've collected a little over 255,000 cubic yards of material. The vast majority of that has been reduced. We did try burning for a brief period of time. The contractor ultimately shut that down after only a couple of days. The timing of trying to use the incinerator was at the same time that McDowell County had some large wildfires, and ultimately they determined that the risk of using that wasn't worth the return. And so they've been largely reducing the material to a single ground mulch and disposing of that in our FEMA approved cell at the landfill. But that's accumulated a tremendous amount of material. I would say that Chesterfield is we have fire concerns with that, as you can imagine. Chesterfield and the fire marshal's office have both been on site, and we're trying to have a pre-drafted plan together for when and if that material were to become hazardous. On average, across this roughly 157-day event thus far, we've had about 25 trucks collecting material, obviously partnering with Debris Tech for the monitoring side. And you can see there it's a tick over 255,000 cubic yards, and generally on the map where most of the material came from to this point. We've also worked, most of what we noticed as we began working with gated communities at the last time, I think it was day 75 when I presented to the board, we were just starting to work through the right of entry contracts for gated communities because the debris collection process on the public assistance side was only applicable to public right-of-ways. And so inside of gated communities and private properties took a little bit more of an extent. First, it had to be approved as part of the FEMA public assistance process, but then it took negotiated contracts with the property owners. We've been, as far as I can tell, most of the gated communities have been cleaned up. Many of them paid for it themselves. They did not use the FEMA public assistance process. I think about 4 of the gated communities that I'm aware of, High Peaks, Harbor Point and Valdez, and a few others around the lake at Lake James, actually used our contractor through this process. The vast majority of them had already had this collection via private contractor and HOA fees. But we do feel that we've worked substantially through that process as well as the right-of-way process. On January 17th, we invited Steve McGugan and the Department of State Emergency Management. They held an intake process for the Home Mitigation Block Grant at Foothills Higher Education Center. They had a fairly decent turnout. I think they ended up processing about 23 to 25 applications. We don't know that all of those have been approved. Ultimately, as we talked about, the Home Mitigation Block Grant will provide for one of 3 options: acquisition, repair, or mitigation, which is typically elevating the house to do something like that. The vast majority, as a reminder, this is a fully state-ran program. The county's really only role is to, if someone makes application and is eligible under the requirements of the Home Mitigation Block Grant Program, that would take that property off of the tax rolls in perpetuity forever. So the Board of Commissioners does have to approve the application being processed by the state. And then again, most all of the applications we saw were acquisition based. And so that would be again between the State Department of Emergency Management and the homeowner. That list has not been given to us by the state. We think that may be back at your April meeting or potentially your May meeting, but it'll be a ledger of the home, the address, and seeking this board's approval to participate in this home mitigation block grant process. We've also been working through these tax value reviews. As we talked about, January 2nd, personal property listing forms were sent out, and that happens every year to give taxpayers an opportunity to list or update their personal property listing forms. This year, we included an informal appeal application for those folks who may have felt that they had their value may be impacted by the storm, unrepaired damages, or impaired in some way. Since that point, our team has been working through site reviews, working through the appeals process, the informal appeal process, and we hope to have a full list by the end of March. Most of our informal appeal applicants really aligned with this preliminary damage assessment, which gave us confidence to the accuracy of what we had mapped out. To date, we received 695. That's about 3.5 times more than a normal year. We have informal tax value appeals every single year, but typically we get between 150 and 250, and this year we had 695. All but about 50 of those have already been worked. And we think that we're going to experience about $5 to $6 million of value impairment on residential property and somewhere between 20 to 25 on the commercial side. Talk a little bit about public assistance program and for us, our application. When you're working through the public assistance disaster recovery process, the type of cost or impact that the county receives has to flow into a category, and there's category, we qualified for 5, there's many more that local governments or public entities may qualify for. But you can see these are the broad categories and the type of costs that we have experienced that we'll be filing for reimbursement. All of this has been encapsulated inside of the 180-day window. As a reminder, only days after the storm, the administration at the federal level issued a 180-day grace period for public assistance process. Typically, it's a 75-25% split, meaning the federal government, once you complete your application and been approved for public assistance, the federal government covers 75% of the cost. 25% of the cost is on the local entity. Once you surpass $1 billion in damages, it becomes what's called a level 1 event, and that 75-25 splits to a 90-10 split, which is what would be here in Western North Carolina for Hurricane Helene. But in this instance, any cost incurred in the first 180 days, which all of ours has, is reimbursable at 100% from the federal government. So as you can see, a tick over $5.1 million to this point, and I don't expect that to change materially. So the big, really 2 items that we have remaining that staff would be seeking some direction from the board is waterway debris, and I know that we've talked about that as a group and individually over the last few months. It's a big decision. We have lots of main waterways as well as navigable and navigable waterways in Burke County, and many of them go past lots of parts of public infrastructure, and that's one of the critical parts about waterway debris removal. It's not simply taking debris out of the waterway, but it's debris that could be hazardous in future events to public infrastructure, public safety, and that determination at times is gray. So similar to right-of-way debris removal, the waterway access debris removal really has 2 distinct choices. One choice is to continue to partner with a private contractor, which is there's 3 primary state emergency management approved contractors that we could choose from. They've gone through a bidding process and been selected by the state. Or you can engage with and request a mission through what's called Web EOC from the state for the Army Corps of Engineers, who would largely administer and oversee the entire project. So think similar to the decision that we had to make when it was just right-of-way debris collection, private contractor versus federal government. We did engage a drone pilot to fly the parts of the Catawba River and to give us some estimates. And this estimate was based off $25 a cubic yard for removal. And for the general thought is that this vegetation or this C&D or this material that could be impacting the waterways is generally not, and it doesn't have to be exact, but generally within 1,000 feet upstream or downstream of some type of public infrastructure. Most often that's bridges, but it could be water plants, it could be power substations, it could be anything like that. Just the most common is bridges. So typically, to get an idea of the scope, you'll start at an interchange at a bridge going over the river. You'll fly upstream 1,000 feet, downstream 1,000 feet, see what kind of tagged GPS coordinates for debris that you see, and then apply that at scale. And so we've done that for the Catawba, and just for scale, we believe the estimated cost is a little under $900,000 to remediate and to remove the debris from that waterway. Now, again, there's many, many more waterways in Burke County, so you got to apply that to scale. We also think that a really meaningful program is what's called private property debris removal. So at the onset of this event, this was not something that FEMA had yet, I'm going to use the word unlocked. It wasn't something that was eligible. Any kind of debris that was going to be collected had to be in a public right-of-way. Recently, private property debris removal has been something that is now available, and it's largely available for qualified private property owners who still have any kind of debris on their property. We think that it makes a lot of sense, and talking to other experts in the industry and talking to our friends at the state, to pair waterway with private property. Two distinct reasons. One is access to the waterway. It is to get equipment, track hose and extraction material equipment into the water largely takes going across private property for entry. And so securing that right of entry marries those two functions together well. Secondly, often the debris that's removed from the waterway was then placed on private property before making its way to the right of way to be collected in that way. So I think there's a lot of economies of scale of putting those two together. So I share that to say those are really the last two kind of functions that the county will be instrumental or be a part of trying to facilitate. And yet we do have two very, I think, different options. Option one is, again, partnering with private contractors. From what we can tell, I think that'll give you a little bit quicker mobilization and some influence over the time. As we've seen through the right-of-way collection efforts, at times it's beneficial for the county to be able to prioritize certain areas of material or certain community needs for a variety of reasons. And having a private contract gives you that ability to be a little bit more nimble and adaptive. The downside is it takes a tremendous amount of time, of staff time, administrative time, to really coordinate and manage all of that and to ensure that the contractors are operating inside the appropriate compliance requirements of the federal government. For example, if the contractor collects or handles material inappropriately, the county would be on the hook for that financially because it would not be reimbursed through the public assistance process. Also, once the 180-day window subsides, we know that it's going to go back to a 90-10 split, 90% federal, 10% local. We've been told, and I've been told directly by a man named Joe Stanton. Joe Stanton is the Deputy Director of Recovery for State EM, that the state of North Carolina is going to pick up the 10% and that local governments aren't going to be responsible. He feels confident of that, but that is not in writing. We don't have assurance of that. So there is some level of financial exposure up to 10% of the cost. Yes.
Brian, let me ask you something. On this waterway debris and this thing we're talking about with the Army Corps of Engineers, would this not be a good time with everything we're talking about with the transfer coming up and those kind of things for Charlotte and our friends down south, and to maybe come together and say, how can we all help on this situation and get it right here at the mother base to start with, because it's all going to funnel down. Is there any kind of marriages between that kind of situation?
Yeah, so I mean, from a logical perspective, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to answer your question directly and indirectly. Indirectly, I think any economies of scale and any kind of regional approach that we could take only makes sense. From a funding and a resource perspective, there are very rigid lines in place. So I'll give you a perfect example. All of the mulch that we have at our solid waste facility, which is taking up a tremendous amount of room, we'll never be able to give it all away. We'll probably have to pay to dispose of it. A sound and good idea may seem like to give that to a paper company. I'm making something up, but somebody who has a secondary market use for it. But if there's any way downstream for that material to turn into a private capital market, it then becomes non-reimbursable upstream. So if we took tractor trailer loads of that mulch and put it on a rail spur up towards the lake, and that was taken to a paper company and turned into pulp and turned into a usable product, and somebody made $1 off of it, that then tracks back upstream, and the county loses all reimbursement for all of that material. You and I spoke with a gentleman who at one, was inquiring about extracting large, 8-foot section logs from the debris site so that they didn't have to be reduced, which makes all the sense in the world, reduces our operational cost, uses the material in a proactive way. But the fact that that timber has value reduces and prevents the federal government from reimbursing the county. So we've collected it and paid the contractor, but then our reimbursement from the federal government is negated. So that's a long way of saying, even though that makes a lot of sense to try to regionalize those resources and kind of do it one time versus duplicating efforts, that applying that logic prevents the funding streams from the federal government, which I think makes it a non-starter. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
One question I have about the PPDR, if the debris on a private property perhaps was wind damage, so they've got 60 trees, they've been cut up, is that included? Because we were talking about waterways and the Corps of Engineers moving it from the waterways. You're getting there, I got ahead.
No, you're all over it. So eligibility, whether it's Army Corps or private, should be the same. And it could be partially damaged buildings that need to be fully demolished. It could be vegetation. It could be C&D. It could be white goods. It's anything that you can demonstrate was created because of the storm. And the reason that this typically, number one, it has to be a level 1 event to even turn this on. When the disaster first happens, it's not an eligible part of public assistance or individual assistance. The reason that it's later in the ball game is because I think found over time is when you tell people that private property debris removal is coming, getting things to the right of way to make it a more efficient process doesn't happen, right? So the idea is you try to incentivize people to get as much to the right of way as possible so that contractors can collect it in a more efficient manner. And then for those things that are too big or in a tough spot or just more challenging in general, that's where PPDR kind of does the final sweep. But to your question, yes, sir, it would, if someone applies and is eligible, that would absolutely be covered. So back to kind of the area that staff is looking for direction. I'll summarize the Army Corps' option by saying they have a tremendous amount of expertise. Anyone who's done, they just have a tremendous amount of expertise in navigable waterways. Anyone who's ever done a substantial building project, if you're going to impede waterways or stream banks, it takes a permit through the Army Corps. So this is something that they have complete authority over. It certainly removes the administrative component from the county. We still have 3 to 4 staff that are spending 10 to 15 hours per week kind of managing the debris collection, the right-of-way debris collection, the gated communities, all those type things. So one of the big differences in the Army Corps, and our chairman and vice chairman and I were able to meet with the representative from the Joint Field Office in Hickory a few weeks ago. We had a good meeting, but he was very clear. Once the county puts in this mission request, and that's what it is, we would ask the state through the state EOC for a dedicated mission for waterway and private property debris removal collection via the Army Corps, and we're out at that point. They don't tell us when they're coming. They don't ask us where we'd like them to start. We don't have a financial interest. I mean, if we have questions, certainly I don't think that it's so standoffish that we can't get information, but it is not a county-led recovery effort. And I think that is the financial exposure and the administrative oversight are the two fundamental differences between a private contract and the Army Corps. I think that there is a little bit of apprehension in the market about the Army Corps' level of overwhelmment and how quickly they'll be able to mobilize. But the gentleman that was here with us that day seemed to think that they would be able to prioritize that in a matter of weeks, and if not, maybe a month or a little bit more. That was his synopsis. So, Mr. Chairman, I hope that's a lot of information, and I recognize that, and I appreciate you all's patience letting me work through it. But happy to answer any questions, and to the extent the board would need additional information to make this decision or give direction, staff will do that. If not, I'd like to hear some direction from the board.
All right, thank you, Mr. Manager. Gentlemen, any more questions, concerns on this item?
Mr. Chairman, Brian, just a comment or two, because not only, of course, do I live here and represent our folks here, but I'm in the other mountain counties often through my work. And something I've noticed is some of the private contractors, sometimes they kind of do what they're, that's maybe not appropriate. I just don't see the discipline, I guess, from some of the private contractors, and that's been a big problem in some of the mountain counties where there's a lot of debris. Some of them have gotten fired, and just my personal opinion, even though we kind of not have the control of it, I've begun to see that with the Army Corps, you get disciplined, even though we may not have that control. Because there's been quite a few in Mitchell County specifically that they've had to tell leave. So I just want the rest of the board to be aware of that, that we also have that risk as well. So
I do think from a regional perspective, the waterway efforts have been heavily leaned on the Army Corps without question. I think I would say it's almost 50-50 for right-of-way debris, private contract versus waterway, but it's almost exclusively Army Corps to this point for other counties for waterway debris removal.
And Mr. Berry, I don't know if you've noticed this or not. I've been hearing, I haven't had any intimate contact, but I'm hearing, and indications are the Corps is working and working pretty good in McDowell and some other counties. So I think it's my opinion that we should move forward with making that request to the Corps of Engineers, and unless, what's the opinion of the board?
I feel the same way. I think it's a good time for everything to kind of come together with somebody like that can get it done. Everybody be on the same page for different parts of our region and all that. They'll have it set up right. I'm all for that.
All in favor of that? Let's just get a vote if we can. All right, Mr. Manager, is that what you need?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much. All right, this brings us to presentation item number 3, EMS recognition of lifesavers. This will be presented by James Robinson, our EMS director. James, come on up.
Afternoon, gentlemen. I don't have the full presentation here. This is just a meeting holder, but we will be recognizing the acts of life-saving. I use that term loosely. It's not something that I like to do because most people within the EMS division like to just think that we're just doing our job. But it does go without saying that we need to be recognizing these individuals for heroic actions, because it's a lot of times it's for families. It's not necessarily for what we do as individuals. So we will be recognizing 3 cardiac arrest saves. We will have 1 childbirth recognition where we assisted a family in that, got the baby back to the hospital and everything went really well. And then 1 Good Samaritan act, and Commissioner Burns was also involved in that on a different angle. So there's a PowerPoint presentation that will be with that. We also have a presentation, very short, about 2 minutes, from April Traxler, which talks about the partnership between Burke County Emergency Services and Fry Hospital and the cardiac care that we're providing every single day on 911 ambulances that makes differences in the outcomes for patients when we get down and they get the cardiac care that they need. So that will be involved also in the end of that presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, James. Any questions for James on this item? Seeing here none, this will remain on the agenda. Thank you, James. Having no scheduled public hearings this month, this moves us on to item number 5, our consent agenda. First item on the consent agenda is Animal Services Foundation, approval of name for volunteer room at the new animal shelter. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Hope you're all doing well this afternoon. As a reminder, I am the president of the Animal Services Foundation. It's a nonprofit that was created to support the Burke County Animal Shelter. We are an all-volunteer board with 9 members and 2 ex officio members. We have a website and a Facebook account. Basically, we support the Burke County Animal Shelter through sheltering, adoption, transport, education, spay and neuter, community outreach, all things shelter. We are, as we were asked by members of this board a few years ago, to raise a significant amount of money for the new facility. There are many good reasons to donate to our Naming Capital campaign. You can recognize, honor, or remember a loved one, a rescue, a family member, a friend, a beloved pet. It's an opportunity to be a part of something bigger. And, you know, there's practical reasons like an advertising opportunity, a tax write-off, or simply just because you care. This is the proposed rooms and prices that are available for purchase. We think we have something for everybody. They range from $150 normal size brick all the way up to potentially naming the shelter itself for $500,000 or plus. We are officially going to kick off the campaign in April. It's already kind of launched as a soft launch. We're updating our website so that folks can go there and, much like you do on any online purchase or your Amazon, you click, you put it in your basket and you check out, and it will keep up with the rolling inventory. We're having that worked in on the back end of our website to help us maintain that data. You can give or purchase a naming rights by PayPal or use a credit card, MasterCard or Visa. Yes, we do take good old-fashioned checks and make them payable to ASFI, Post Office Box 52 here in Morganton. In the fall, the commissioners approved the naming policy, which is in your packet for a refresher. And essentially it says that all the names that are put forward and paid for, that you guys have final approval over them. I'm very pleased to report that we have received our first, what I like to call our big purchase. Will and Rose Mueller of Valdez donated $5,000 for the volunteer area in honor of Valdez Police Officer Dylan Hicks, Code Enforcement Officer and Animal Control. So we are very, very appreciative of them. They're great community advocates in Valdez, and they are very excited to, let the town know, and so that's why I'm here. I was going to save them till we had a few more in hand, but they're excited to share their news, and I don't blame them, so here I am. And then we also have a pledge from Dr. Jenny McGrady. She is the Animal Shelter's veterinarian of record, and also she's affiliated with Animal Hospital of East Burke. She has pledged $5,000 for naming the medical office, and she proposes the name of, for her name, Dr. Jennifer McGrady. I'm not sure if you want to, take action on the pledge at this time, so your agenda item is simply for the Mueller's donation, and you can let me know what you would like to do with the pledge. I can bring that back when I actually have the money in hand. The volunteer space is a very important space in terms of sheltering. there is always more work to be done than staff can get done, and volunteers play a crucial role in, feeding, caring, socializing, transport, adoption events. Having a good group of volunteers is just instrumental to a successful shelter. And we have a good group. We are limited in a space right now, so the volunteer pool is somewhat small, but they are dedicated and show up regularly. They donate hundreds of hours a year, and we're very grateful for them. The space is a small area. It's about 50-some square feet, and the shelter, the medical office is about 80-some square feet. Again, that's where the veterinarian will, keep the records and files and do their medical paperwork. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any questions on this side? All right, seeing here none, we'll leave it as is with the one accepted gift and come back when we get others ready.
I'll do it.
All right, thank you,
Thank
ma'am. Item number 2, Burke County Public Schools, purchase of real property. Mr. Lawson's with us today. Good afternoon, Keith.
Good afternoon, Chairman Britton, County Commissioners. Come before you this afternoon representing the Burke County Board of Education in a resolution officially titled County of Burke, Resolution Approving Purchase Price of Property Acquired for School Construction. I have a few whereases to go through here, and I'll paraphrase. I hope you've had an opportunity to review the document beforehand. But, of course, at the end, if not, I'll certainly be happy to entertain any questions you may have. Whereas the Burke County Board of Education has entered into a contract negotiations to acquire a certain parcel of land having an address of 305A 3rd Street Southwest, Hildebrand, consisting of approximately 10.06 acres. Whereas the board has also entered into contract negotiations to acquire an adjoining parcel at 0 US Highway 70 West, Hildebrand, consisting of 3.91 acres. So the two combined parcels, of course, would equal 13.97, or just 3/100ths of an acre short of 14 acres. Whereas the board will further evaluate the suitability of the parcels of property for such use, and again, that being for the construction of a new elementary school in eastern Burke County. Whereas pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 115C-426F, the approval of the Burke County Board of Commissioners for the purchase price to be paid for any property to be acquired for school construction is required. And now the all-important paragraph. Now therefore be it resolved that the County of Burke, State of North Carolina, and by and through the Board of Commissioners, hereby approves the purchase price of $675,000.
All right, thank you, Keith. Gentlemen, any questions for Keith on this item?
Hey, Keith.
Oh, sir.
It's talking about the purchase and then evaluate, and I'm not an attorney, of course, so I'd just like to be clear. They're not going to purchase it and then find out that it can't be used.
No, sir. No, sir. There will be a phase 1, phase 2 environmental studies completed. There will be a placement, a test fit of the facility. Also, there's some determinations to be made as to a stream buffer. So all of those things would be answered and satisfied before the property would actually be purchased. Yes, sir.
Other questions? All right.
Mr. Lawson, where is the funding for this money coming from?
Okay, as you all are well aware, back about a year ago, we received a $42 million lottery grant from the state. Again, those are proceeds from the lottery fund, North Carolina Education Lottery, to construct a new elementary school. We, here in the county, have a significant capital fund balance. The $42 million grant from the state requires a county match. So we would be providing those funds as well as funds to purchase this land from our own county capital fund balance, and the remainder of the project and the construction would be utilizing the lottery funds provided by the state.
Other questions? All right. Seeing here none, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Item number 3 comes from the clerk, appointments and reappointments to the Parks and Recreation Commission. Madam Clerk.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a request to reappoint Mendel Dearberry and Mo Beam to the Parks and Recreation Commission, seat number 3, Drexel, and seat number 10, Oak Hill, respectively, for 3-year terms ending March 31, 2028, and to appoint Jordan Phillips to the Parks and Recreation Commission, seat number 7, representing W.A. Young, to complete the remainder of a term ending March 31st, 2027. Be happy to entertain any questions.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any questions on this item? Seeing here none, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 4, coming from the county manager, adoption of opioid resolution. Mr. Manager.
Mr. Chairman, this is a resolution that's directed by the board from your February 14th work session to primarily extend the position of opioid coordinator. We posted that position, which has been open largely since Thanksgiving, directly following your work session on Valentine's Day. And as we talked about that day, the original funding was a 2-year grant from June of 2023 through June of 2025. We can't extend that position for the 3-year term that you all took action on without appropriating those funds from the opioid settlement dollars, which requires a resolution. We're working on that, and it'll be finalized ahead of your meeting in 2 weeks.
All right, thank you, sir. Any questions on this item? All right, without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 5, our DSS proclamation for Social Worker Appreciation Month. This item will be presented by Corey Fisher-Wellman. Afternoon, Corey.
Good afternoon. I'm here to ask that you guys accept a proclamation declaring March as Social Worker Appreciation Month, recognizing the dedication, expertise, and impacts of social workers across Burke County. The theme of this year's month is Social Work, Compassion, and Action. Highlights how social workers not only care deeply about people, but also take meaningful action to support individuals, families, and communities. Social workers are at the forefront of addressing critical societal challenges, including mental health, substance abuse disorders, income equality, and homelessness. Their work spans hospitals, schools, government agencies, social service organizations, and more, making them essential to the well-being of our society. Social work is one of the fastest growing professions in the U.S., with demand projected to increase by 7% by 2033, reinforcing the vital role social workers play in shaping stronger, healthy communities. This proclamation serves to honor their contributions, acknowledge their commitment, and emphasize the importance of self-care for those in helping professions. Included with the proclamation, which I won't read to you unless you want me to.
All right, thank you, Corey. Gentlemen, you've got the proclamation in your package. Any questions on this item? We are certainly glad to recognize all our DSS workers. It is tremendous work and touches everybody in every way. And so we certainly appreciate that and are glad to do that. This item will remain without objection on the consent agenda. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Item number 6, finance, approval of audit contract for fiscal year 25-26. This will come from Ms. Margaret, our Deputy County Manager, Finance Director. Gentlemen, I think we do have a handout on this item.
Morning, or afternoon, whatever it is today, I don't know. This draft was received this morning for us to go through. This is for the 25-26, it'll be for the 25-26 audit, and it is $49,500, and the funding will be included in the coming budget.
Any questions on this item?
Since I'm a newer commissioner here, is that amount pretty standard and normal for the level of audit that we have?
Yes.
Is that,
I would point out that I think it's an exceptionally discounted rate. It's lower than the county paid historically before we changed, and I think if you looked at counties with our fund structure, meaning the number of funds that we have, number of general ledger accounts we have, budget size, FTEs, they would be paying substantially more. So I think a big part of it is because our team is prepared. We draft our own financial statements. Most counties in North Carolina don't have the expertise on staff to draft full accrual financial statements, which takes a lot off of the audit firm and helps not impair their independence. So that information, if it's helpful to you, Commissioner, is available on the Local Government Commission's website, and we can just put together a summary to include in your packet before our next meeting. But I think what we'll see is that we're getting actually a very good rate for the complexity of the audit we have.
thank you.
When I came 6 years ago, the audit cost was $54,000. So we've actually been able to reduce it as low as $42,000, and then inflation brought it back up a little bit.
Other questions, comments? Seeing here none, without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
Item number 7, Tax Department Tax Collections Report. This will be presented by Mr. Bridges, our tax administrator. Afternoon, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got copies.
Thank you, sir.
Would you like a cracker or something to drink, Larry?
All right, for the year from July 1, 2024 through February 28th of 2025, property tax collected here in Burke County was $52,671,580.28. That is 73.89% of the budgeted amount, with a balance to collect of $18,616,295.86. Motor vehicle taxes collected this year is $3,713,609.53. That is 73.16% of the budget amount, with a balance to collect of $1,362,634.47. Current year taxes is $56,385,189.81. That is 94.16% of the budget amount, with a balance to collect of $3,484,233.19. Delinquent taxes collected, is $418,860.86. That is 59.84% of the budget amount, with a balance to collect of $281,139.14. Penalties and interest collected thus far is $250,262.33. That is 77.29% of the budget amount, with a balance to collect of $73,737.67. The tax levy is $71,287,876.14. Collected so far is $52,671,580.28. That is 73.89%, with a balance to collect of $18,616,295.86.
All right, thank you, John. Any questions for John on the collection report? Seeing here none, this item will remain on consent agenda. Brings us to item 8, release refund report. We'll hear from John.
So the release and refund for the month of February, report amount is $5,815.08. The rebuild amount of $1,314.42, with a net release of $4,500.66, and there were no refunds. For the motor vehicle taxes, the refunds over $100, there was $1,093.88.
All right, gentlemen, you've heard this report. Any questions on the release refund report? All right, seeing here none, without objection, this item will remain on the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Bridgers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Brings us to item number 9, Western Piedmont Community College presentation of financial data for the period ending December 31, 2024. Afternoon, Sandy.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. First of all, I want to apologize for not making the February meeting. As I get older, sometimes these changes like Tuesday to Monday kind of throw me off a little bit. So I do apologize for that. I'm here to give you a brief update of our finances through December 31st, 2024, the midpoint of our fiscal year. And in the first columns, you'll see our state funds. Our current budget at December 31st was $19,182,088. And through December, we spent $8,230,288, or approximately 43% of our budget. The college received $1.8 million in hurricane relief, primarily for emergency assistance for students and tuition assistance for the spring 2025 semester as needed. The next 3 columns you have in light blue represent our county budget and actual expenditures. Our budget is $3,060,382 for operations, and we've spent $1,490,668, utilizing 49% of our budget through December. And just as an update, as of February 28th, we're at 65.2% of our budget. So on track there to either spend all of our budget, maybe a little bit over, depending on some of the items we have going on, some informal projects that we want to do around campus, renovating some classrooms to keep moving our campus forward. So we'll keep you updated on those items. The last 3 columns you see are our institutional funds. And you can see our budget and what was spent. The total combined budget for all funding sources for the college is at $28,947,042. And we've spent approximately 49.5% of that budget. So again, very consistent with prior years. The next slide that you will see will show our categories. So we break this down. A lot of times what you see is purpose codes, but we'll break the county expenditures down by the categories. And of course, the 3 major categories are salaries and benefits at 28.8%, contracted services, such as our housekeeping services at 19.7%, and utilities at 18.7%. So outside of finances, a few items for the college. Our spring semester went well considering the hurricane. We did have a 2 to 3% increase over last spring, so not as well of an increase as we had in the fall, but still very good considering the hurricane, and we feel like we didn't lose any students because of the hurricane. We had success coaches that were reaching out to students on a continuous basis, making sure that they were taken care of. And as far as the hurricane, the campus did not see we saw very little damage. We had a lot of trees down on our nature trail. Our Alpine Tower, which was for our therapeutic recreation program, it was destroyed. So we are in the process of trying to rebuild it, but otherwise, the campus really did not have a lot of damage. Our current emergency service training center did receive some flooding, but as you know, our current center is in a flood zone, so we expected that. As far as damages that we did receive, we're working with our insurance company and also FEMA to get some money to rebuild the Alpine Tower primarily and try to move forward with that. Our Emergency Service Training Center the new site is currently underway. Will be completed in May 2026. Right now there's not a lot to see because I've just cleared a lot of earthwork, cleared a lot of the trees and doing a lot of earthwork. They do have a retaining wall started, and they've got temporary power now for their construction trailer. In the next, as we get into spring, you'll be able to see a lot more action going on there. And then two major initiatives for the college that I just wanted to mention so you're aware of. In fall 25, we are going to majority 8-week courses. Probably about 80 to 85% of our courses will go to an 8-week semesters. That is not for students to take additional courses. It's really just to kind of split it out so they have time to concentrate on a smaller number of courses at one time. So if a student was taking 4 classes in a full semester, they may take 2 in the first 8 weeks and 2 in the second 8 weeks. We feel like there will be more student success with that program. Another major initiative of the college, and this is really due to some retirements, is going to what we're calling a one college model. And this is really the merging of continuing education and curriculum. We've heard in the last several years, students and employers want short-term workforce development. We feel like we can merge those two, bring in students on short-term courses that have pathways into curriculum programs, and be able to offer more and have more services for our students. So that's my update for the college. Again, apologize for not being here in February. Any questions that I can answer?
Questions for Sandy? Did you have any damage on the new location for your emergency services?
We did not have any damages on the new location because we hadn't really gotten started, but the hurricane did help us by taking down quite a few trees on the site.
Okay. Without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, this brings us to item number 6, items for decision. First item comes from our tax administrator, Mr. Bridges, tax resolution, personal property tax audit policy. Mr. Bridges.
Mr. Chairman, we added consent item number 10 for a budget amendment 2. If I may cover that.
Yes, you did. And would that be actually now be number 11, Madam Clerk? Or does that, is that going to matter?
No, the first one was on decision items.
That's it.
We took it off that and added it to consent. It's number 10 on consent in your notes.
I see it, yes. Okay, my apologies. Item number 10, Mr. Manager.
Yes, sir. Item number 10 on the consent agenda is budget amendment number 10 on the fiscal year. This is a request to budget $11,630. This is a state grant. Does not require any local match. It's from the Department of Public Health, and our health department is requesting to budget that to do some lean performance management training to help us really focus on efficiency and quality improvement. So that'll be the request, Mr. Chairman, just a simple budget amendment to budget these state resources in the context of training. The focus of that training is lean performance and quality improvement.
Any questions on this item? You said we have a handout on this item, Madam Clerk. I'm getting there. Maybe. All right. Any other comments? Thank you, Mr. Manager. Without objection, this item will remain on consent agenda. All right, now, Mr. Bridgers.
With your permission, I'm going to present this item as well. John and I have worked closely on it together, but I've asked his permission, and I'll ask yours if I may walk the board through this.
All right, carry on.
I think we have a short PowerPoint. Here we go. The topic is in under the umbrella of tax administration, which is all things tax, listing and appraisal and collection and mapping and all of the functions that go into tax administration with an effort of getting better. There's components inside of the taxation field that are very black and white, and there's some components that require some local policy. So what I'd like to do is just quickly provide a little bit of background on the North Carolina Machinery Act, which is the chapter of our legislative code that authorizes counties and requires counties to levy ad valorem tax and the different components, and then authorizes and gives authority to the tax administrator on how to really process those laws and how to apply them. And then what I'd like the board to consider is what I would call standard operating procedure in 3 fundamental buckets. The first one is business personal property. The second one is what we call present use property values. And then lastly, how the county would engage and begin the tax foreclosure process. So just quickly, the Machinery Act of North Carolina is Chapter 105 of the General Statutes. It's an incredibly long, robust guideline and a set of legislation that governs all things tax, and included in that is the appraisal process as well as collections. Something to keep in mind is that our tax base, although it's our total tax base, and as you can see for the year that we're operating, about $10.8 billion, it's really broken down into compartments. Real property, so when we talk about reappraisals, match reappraisals, revaluations, that's only impacting that real property component. And for Burke County, you can see of our $10.8 billion, about $8.6 billion of that is real property. And real property is buildings and land, structures and land. We also have personal property, which are things that we own that may be depreciable assets, but aren't a fixed real property. And we also have state boards. State boards are things that are largely valued by the state, and it's usually utility type operations, so power companies or type industries that have been given, I'm going to call it monopolistic rights to operate in a certain region, and their assets are also valued on Department of Revenue schedules and provided to us. Duke Energy is obviously the biggest, but also Bell South and other companies like that fall into those buckets. And then lastly, and customarily, it's usually 10 to 12% of your total tax base, motor vehicles are part of our tax base. So for today's discussion, I'm going to touch on a couple of those. So I'll start with business personal property. There can be individual personal property, there can be business personal property, but largely personal property is things like equipment and machinery and furniture and fixtures. It's things that if you took the building and turned it upside down and shook it, they would all fall out. That's the simple definition of personal property. Personal property, as we talked about earlier when we were talking about Hurricane Helene, has to be listed. There is no deed transfer. There is usually no bank transaction for personal property. So the tax office annually sends out a listing form. It is up to the taxpayer to list all of their assets. And it's a requirement of the tax administrator to ensure that they're capturing as equitable and accurately as they can all taxable property. The Machinery Act, I think, talks about equitable taxation and the idea that if someone's underpaying, that requires an overpayment by someone else. And so this listing form is something that is a critical component. As you can see, personal property is about $1.2 billion if you include the state board component of our total tax base, and personal property is a big part of that. I think it's also important to point out that the statute is so granular that it doesn't even allow us to determine when these may be late or what the penalty for late listing is. So when we see late listing penalty fees of 10% in the date, all of that is driven by the North Carolina Machinery Act. So there's a policy that is being presented to you for consideration that would formalize how we review business personal property listings and to create this kind of standard. The idea being there's a certain threshold, a certain materiality, where I'm suggesting $50,000. So if you take $50,000 and multiply it by our tax rate, it's less than $300 a year in property tax. That's why that value. There's a certain materiality component, and then there's a timing component. And what we're recommending is something in the provision of 8 years. And generally the idea here is that every 8 years, staff would review any business personal property listing account that has a value of more than $50,000. And a review is fairly simple. We would use an outside third-party consulting firm to ensure credibility and objectivity. But generally you ask the taxpayer for their tax return, and you compare the assets that they're claiming on their tax return for depreciation expense, which lowers their taxable income and lowers their income tax, to the assets that they've listed on the personal property listing form to make sure that those match. My experience is most of the time, there's no intentionality to those not reconciling. Years and years go by and folks forget to list or maybe they've forgot to take something off. Maybe they have, I've seen in my career a grading company, for example, who has a very expensive piece of earth moving equipment and they sell that, but it's listed in prior years by their accountant. They change bookkeepers. They forget to notify the county. We keep taxing them on that because we don't know that it's been removed. So it can work either way for the taxpayer. It could be an incomplete list of items being taxed, or it can be a list that they're being taxed for items that they no longer have and operate. And we don't want anything. Our goal is to make sure that the taxing detail is in alignment with how the business is operating and no one's being overtaxed or undertaxed. That's the goal here. So that's the business personal property listing. And again, the idea here is to remove the discretion. We do business personal property listing audits now and reviews, but there's not standard operating procedure to how that operates. This model would say for anything over $50,000, you do roughly 16% of those or 1/8 of those per year. And every 8 years, if you have a business, then you're going to have a review. And we believe that we can do that in a systematic way that's not overburdensome on anyone.
How many of those do we have? Any, just a rough idea?
I don't have a rough idea right now.
It is 8 years. Is there nothing in the statute that directs these?
So present use value requires an audit every 8 years. That's where, now we're doing that more often, and there's a reason for that. And when we get to present use is a good cliche or a good transition point. So the inside of the statute, there is a requirement that the administrator does do a review to ensure active use if a property is in present use value. We're doing that every 4 years now because there's a 3-year look back if you ever come out of one of those designations. And 8 years would create some challenges. So for me, the reason that I proposed 8 years and that John and I proposed 8 years was simply because there was some statutory binding component to present use, some precedent for that, but it also didn't overburden trying to do too many at one time. We felt like that would be an absorbable amount. And as a taxpayer, going through it once every 8 years seemed more achievable than every 3 or 4 years having to work with an independent firm outside the county to submit tax documents and those type things.
Is it reasonable to think that at least half of our businesses stay in business 8 years?
It's a fair question. Depends on if they're startup or if they're not. I think we all have seen the data on incubator type startup businesses, and they may not make it that long. So there's some validity to that for sure. And what their personal property listing values would look like if they didn't operate that long, it's a fair question. So I don't know how to answer that. I mean, we can certainly gather the data between now and 2 weeks on how many accounts that would be over 50, or how many were, formed through the Secretary of State's office, that either never listed or went out, filed, dissolution forms before 8 years. We can do our very best to try to figure that out.
Yes.
Brian, how can we get the community and the taxpayers, moving forward with this and the businesses and stuff like that, where it's, I know in the past people, they do things in the shade, they trying to survive, they're doing different kinds of things and they hide things or whatever the case may be, or they didn't go through the proper protocols and those kind of things. What can we do to proactively help the taxpayer understand how this is, and the ones who may have stuff out there that hasn't been reported, underreported, and without them freaking out, and saying, hey, this is just, this is proper protocols. Is there a way to do that without them going crazy?
Well, I think that if, one option would be, as you begin to introduce this type of policy, maybe there's a grace period for failure. Again, we just look statutorily, there's a late listing penalty date and a calculation that's statutory. We don't have any discretion on. But we could consider maybe soft introduction strategies that looks to not overburdened. I think one thing that's always important to remember is that, again, I think this idea that if one entity is undertaxed, by default, other entities have to be over. And what we're trying to create is equitable and fair as best we can. I don't think that any of us are proponents of the ad valorem taxing methodology, meaning you're taxed on the property that you own, and it's a component of diminishing returns. The better you do, the more you pay in tax. I think from a philosophical perspective, many of us could argue there's better ways, but that's what the North Carolina General Assembly has said we must operate under, right? And so for folks who have maybe intentionally or unintentionally operated without listing business personal property, I don't know how we would better introduce something than to try to explain the purpose, the fact that we only want it to be accurate. If they've listed something in the past and haven't removed it, there's a chance they're still paying property tax on something that they no longer even have. So this is to their benefit, and our only goal is to make it accurate and follow the law.
It just seems like it's a good time to be transparency on both sides.
Sure.
The taxpayer too.
Yeah, for sure. Sure.
Okay, carry on.
Okay. So the second one, policy or standard operating procedure for consideration is this idea of present use value. This is a tax deferment program. It fundamentally falls into three components: horticulture, agriculture, and forestry. And you can see the requirements there to be considered active use and to apply. If you do apply and you are approved, again, it's based on ownership size, income, but the idea is that you pay a significantly lower amount of property tax, and it primarily to help with that commercial operation. And important to say that through NC State, the North Carolina Cooperative Extensions folks annually draft these present use values. So this is an evaluation that we do here locally, that there are what we call tax schedules or tables of values specific for present use that give us the amount. So if you go on GIS and you find a large piece of property, for example, that meets the requirement for forestry, and you see a value and you're like, who in the heck came up with this value? Where'd that come from? That was something drafted at the state level that Burke County adopted, like other counties in North Carolina. But there are many properties that meet these requirements that pay a substantial lower amount. And again, this policy statutorily, this 105-296J, requires an every 8-year review. And the review is as simple as driving by the property to make sure that it's, quote, in active production, that it's being used in the way that the taxing policy is being applied. We're already doing that on a 4-year cycle. Statutorily, we have to do it at least every 8. I just wanted to formalize the practice that we have now so that there's no, to Commissioner Stroud's point, why did you look at mine? For someone who may not be in active production but has been receiving that benefit, there's a 3-year look back period. Or if you take it out of that, if you own a piece of property that's in one of these present use classifications and you sell it and the next user doesn't apply, doesn't qualify, doesn't use it in that way, you have to go back 3 previous years and pay the non-present use, non-deferred tax component. And so it can be a fairly robust level of resource allocation and tax allocation. So I want to be very clear about, we're looking at 25% of the properties every single year, and the only question is, for the level that you've applied and the program that you've applied for, do you meet the legal parameters? Questions on that one? So we have one more, and I would say this one's the most complicated of the two, or of the 3. This Machinery Act also covers property tax foreclosure. And as the board's well aware, we have an attorney that's from Asheville that handles foreclosure for Burke County. Kanye Law Firm. I think they represent about 15 counties, counties as large as Mecklenburg, counties as small as some of the mountain counties to our west. We, from a board-approved operating procedure and formalized policy, really don't have. We have a practice of being fairly aggressive in foreclosure. But when we look and kind of evaluate and self-reflect on how we're doing that, I think that we would be better off to be more consistent and have a policy that we've talked about and considered and our board has approved. We've made some recommendations based on School of Government, based on looking at other counties, and based on kind of a test of reasonableness of what may be appropriate. The board may see changes that you'd like to have, but I've highlighted just a couple of things. The first thing is I think that there should be a minimum dollar amount and a minimum amount of time. There's a fee schedule by our tax attorney, and statutorily those fees can be assigned to the taxpayer. So the county does not actually come out of pocket for those legal fees, but it's assigned to the property that they're working. So I think that there's a reasonableness test, but for the amount of money and the amount of time that something's outstanding, that would go into a full-blown foreclosure. What I've proposed is something that's been outstanding for more than 1 year and more than $500. And the 1 year gives us ample time to do appropriate notices, both certified mail as well as any way we can get in touch with the taxpayer. We can, you'll see on the next slide, we can do an escalating ladder for trying to get in contact and trying to work with it. But to me, things that fall below those thresholds can be handled in an alternative way other than tax foreclosure. So for example, like a lien, if there was a piece of property that had a $200 back taxes and we did not, the board chose to set thresholds as we're talking today, there are other alternatives. We're not just saying you don't have to pay or there won't be collection efforts. We have wage garnishment, we have debt set off, we have escalating strategies that we can use, but ultimately we also can apply a lien. And if that property ever sells or that property ever changes hands in any way, the county would be in line to collect those amounts at that point. And it's just a less costly impact to the taxpayer that I think will incur those legal fees down, or whomever owns that property at some point, that whether it's changing hands or it's residing with the current owner. So again, there's a variety of different steps there in your policy. I tried to highlight some of those. But our first action, I think, should be wage garnishment. Most employees have are on an Employment Security Commission roster somewhere, and we have access to that through something called LexisNexis. And so the law gives us the ability to attach their wages and to work with them. Generally, we would reach out and say, what's the appropriate amount that we can do? Can you pay $5 a week or $10 a month? When we don't get that back, that's when we would move into wage garnishment. I think that would not happen for at least 60 days. At least that's what we've proposed here. And also debt set off. Debt set off is an option, a tool that the Department of Revenue gives us. So if someone wins, they get a state refund tax, or they win the lottery through the state system, it flags them that they owe some type of debt to local government, and that's collected and then sent to us that way. So again, just trying to put more formality to our collection policies. These are some recommendations, some options that we've seen from just industry best practices, we think. Happy to answer any questions you all may have about that, but ultimately what we'll be asking you to consider in 2 weeks, is consideration of this business personal property, this present use valuation, and this tax foreclosure policy so that we can put some standardization to our practices.
Any thoughts, questions on this? Yes, sir.
Can I go back to number 2, present use value? The United States Department of Agriculture has a conservation reserve program where a landowner gets paid to not do anything with his land, to preserve maybe an environmental quality to that or something. Can you be eligible for the CRP through the United States and get paid not to do anything with your land and get a present use value tax deduction? It seems kind of like double dipping to me.
Yeah, that's a complicated question, but I would say in North Carolina, unless you meet one of these 3 specific guidelines, you're not eligible for any present use deferred taxation program. So unless you file and register your property, with the tax department and you meet these thresholds, you would not receive any deferment. And my guess is if you don't have horticulture planted, agriculture planted, or forestry, then which means you are doing something, you would not qualify for the USDA program. So likely not, but I certainly wouldn't wouldn't say that it's never happened. That's why I think the review process is so important.
Yes, sir.
Brian, I know that I'd sent you a couple of letters from our tax attorney that went to the citizens. The citizens sent them on to a state elected official who sent them on to me, and I know you've looked at those. What we're proposing here in a couple of weeks to vote on, would these particular issues be covered in something like that? I don't know the details on them. I'm sure you've looked into it.
Yes,
Because it's really none of my business, but, except that I'm trying to make sure I represent people who may have been gone after aggressively when there wasn't a need to, and I don't know that. So I'm just asking, is part of what we're proposing because of these kinds of things that have happened?
I think, so yes, much of what we've looked at was triggered by some of that information. And so I think that standardizing our process would have prevented many of those from going to that level. I do believe that. Whether it was the minimum dollar threshold, the elapsed time, the required communications, the fact that we could have issued, a lien. I don't think that anything was done improper, but I do think that having a more formalized, standardized review process that has layers and takes a little bit of time, many of those would likely not have made it to the foreclosure process. And that, I think, would have prevented some fairly large legal fees from being, kind of adding up for those taxpayers.
Well, just for the rest of you, I don't know if you've seen what our tax attorney sends out, these letters, but one was a tax due of $400 or $500, and there were $7,000 or $8,000 added to that. This one's not, that I just happen to have in front of me on my phone, $941 worth of taxes, $8,073 in charges, on top of that. And I just want to have sympathy for those folks, and I don't know the circumstances of why they couldn't pay, but to think that maybe on the last minute they showed up at the courthouse to be able to save their property, and they rounded up the $1,000 or $1,200, and they get there and think, well, I can't pay $9,000. So I hope we would have a little more sympathy in those situations.
I do think it'll be a more reasonable process in those situations.
I think based on some of the ones that I've been aware of, it may be a two-edged sword in that if they got to that point, they get, that's not a happy place to be. They probably won't be in a happy place when they get their wages garnished either. So it's, it would cost them less, but it's that, none of it feels good.
And I don't want to in any way insinuate that we don't have standardized practice. Now, we have a 13-step process that John and his team go through before anything is sent to Kanye, right? So, and the attorneys in Asheville, including wage garnishment, we're doing that already. But the difference is there was no minimum threshold, there was no minimum elongated time, there wasn't a formalized policy and standard operating procedures approved by the Board of Commissioners. And at times that can lead to inconsistency depending on who's administering the practice. And so we're just trying to formalize that in a way that I think we can all practice consistently.
One other thought that I had back on the business property again, and this may not be of value, but John and Brian, as you look at that further, would it make any sense to, on year 2 or 3 from a new business, we review that one before it's, maybe year 7 and they never done anything right and they're out of business. Maybe you get a chance in year 2 or 3 to get somebody on the right track, and then you go to an 8-year schedule.
So I think
I don't know if that makes any sense, but
the challenge would be identifying new businesses, right? So we'd have to, I don't know that there's a systematic way for the Secretary of State to say, here's a new business formed in your jurisdiction, engage with them to see if they have business personal property to list.
I mean, would we not have a record of, well,
If they've never filed ever, we don't have anything.
But we start billing their taxes.
If they have real property and it's in a commercial account, that could be a trigger and that could be something we look at. But one of the bigger challenges For real property improvements, there's often a building permit or some type of, internal system that triggers the appraisal process and the assessment process and all those kind of things, and register of deeds office are all tied together. On the personal property side, it's much more challenging.
Now, I'm talking about business.
Yes.
Business, personal property.
Me too, and I suppose that we could try to do an analysis to say, is there business, real property that doesn't have adjoined, or that's new, that doesn't have listed personal property and inquire about that? Well, again, we can look at those numbers between now and 2 weeks and have a little more of a data-driven update.
Any other comment, questions? All right, hearing none, this item will remain on decision. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Item number 2, tax resolution, present use value audit policy.
Yeah, those are all three.
So that's 1, 2, and 3 of what we just talked about.
Yes, sir.
All right. All right, gentlemen, this brings us, we did take away item number 4, so that'll come back to us later. Item 7, reports and comments, election department update. Good to have Kenny Brown with us today. Kenny, come on up.
Good afternoon. Hope y'all are doing good. I put together a department update for y'all. It's up.
Excuse me.
The Burke County Board of Elections is located at 2128 South Sterling Street, Suite 100, at the Foothills Higher Education Center. Our current Board of Election members are L.H. Kirksey, the chair, Sandy Walker, secretary, Linda Walker, member, Anthony Iovino, member, Beverly Carlton, member. The Board of Elections meets every second Tuesday of the month at the Board of Elections office at South Sterling, and we are one of the about only counties that meets every month. A lot of other counties, when we have off election years, like the municipals coming up this year, some counties don't meet, for 2 or 3 months, they don't meet, but Burke County does meet every month. Email contact for the Board of Election members, or the office is burke.boe@burkenc.org. Our current staff is myself as director, Deputy Director Dustin Wise, Election Specialist 1, Amy Moore, Election Specialist 3 is Trent Price. We have 3 part-time office staff that comes in like during election time, or if we need to be out of the office for an event, training with the state or something, one of those 3 people come in and sit in office, and so the board is always open. Also, election workers. This past 2024 election cycle, we employed 40 early voting workers, 161 election day poll workers. Of those, 41 were first-time poll workers, and 4 high school students worked election day. We've not had a high school student in Burke County working election day in probably about 10 years.
That's good.
We operate 5 early voting sites across the county: the Glen Alpine Town Hall, Morganton Senior Center, the Board of Election Office, the Rutherford College Town Hall, and the Hildebrand Library/Senior Center. We also have 31 voting precincts election day, reaching from Jonas Ridge all the way down to Lower Fork, out to Silver Creek 2, which is West End, and all the way down to Akron 5, which is Longview. Of the 2024 election voter turnout, Burke County voted 46,000 people out of 60,591 registered voters, for a turnout of, out of 46,000 out of 60,596 registered voters, for a voter registration or voter turnout of 75.91%. The state of North Carolina voted 5.7 million approximately out of 7.7 million registered voters for a 73.73% turnout. Burke County turned out 2% more than the state average did. Voter affiliation in Burke County is this chart here that shows Democrats, Republicans, unaffiliated, Green, Justice for All, Libertarian, no labels, and We the People. Which Republicans is in the most registered here with 24,631. Unaffiliated is 22,376. Democrats is 11,655. And then it goes down from there. This is when we have election time and we have to deliver to these precincts for early voting and election day. General Service comes out and helps us. These are cages that all of our equipment goes in. They're loaded the day before election on usually the Monday. And we're sent out till we have the trailers that the county purchased for us. I think 4 years ago, that deliver our equipment to all 31 election day sites. This year, for the first time, we did an inaugural appreciation celebration for the election workers. IT was invited also. They helped set up election day precincts and early voting along with general services. And all poll workers, approximately 90 people, attended this first poll worker appreciation dinner. It really thrilled the people. They felt appreciated. This was all by donations from area businesses in the county. The only thing that was took out of our budget was some plates and cups that we purchased. All the food and every gifts. We did give out some little gift cards and free appetizers from like Longhorn that donated. And the people, they really felt appreciated because they really worked hard, which they always work hard, but this was a very trying election. To register to vote in Burke County, you can come to the Board of Election office and pick up a registration form, turn it back in, or you can take it home, send it back. You also can go onto our Burke County Board of Election website that gives you a link to the state DMV through the state board to the DMV to register, or you can scan this code block here that will get you that. Also, voter ID in North Carolina. This was our 4th election with the new voter ID rules in place. The Board of Election office can issue you a photo ID, only good for to voting. So far in the 2024 process, we've printed 131 picture IDs for citizens here in Burke County. You have to already be registered to be able to get a photo ID. There are 59,183 registered voters as of February the 1st of this year. In January of 2025, we sent out a NCOA mailing confirmation cards to 4,994 registered voters here in the county, trying to update their record of needing an address if they moved or if they've moved out of state. That was done, so those cards are coming back in now. We now do, since July the 1st of 2024, we do weekly list maintenance conducted in our office. That includes removal of ineligible voters due to deaths, felony convictions, MVRA survey reports, duplicates, registrations, out-of-state cancellations, to ensure that we have an accurate voter registration roll. Burke County staff will attend the North Carolina Association of Directors of Election Conference in Durham coming up this March. That's a conference that only happens once every 2 years. We also have 2025 municipal candidate filing this year, starting July the 7th at 8 a.m. to July the 18th at 12 p.m. The municipalities will be Conley Springs, Drexel, Glen Alpine, Hickory, Longview, Morganton, Rhodhiss, and Valdez. Election day will be November the 4th, 2025. We do not have primaries when it's a municipality because they run as nonpartisan. The only way that we would have to have a primary in October would be for the city of Hickory. We're Ward 5. We have, I think, 27 voters that are in Ward 5 for the city of Hickory, but if there's 3 people that file for mayor or 3 people that file for Ward 5, we will have to have a primary just for Icard 5, which is at Longview. Candidate filing for the March 2026 primary starts December the 1st of this year through December the 19th. Primary election day for the 2026 midterm is March the 3rd. General election will be November the 3rd of 2026. So you see how fast it goes. We just got through the 2024 election. We're talking about a 7-town municipality going on, and then we've got filing this year also for the midterms of 2026. This is our budget, physical budget. We have approximately $564,000. This calculates down to the average cost per citizen of the county to $6.39 or $9.54 per registered voter that we have in the county. We can compare that to Are there one more slide? Okay, this compares to following counties around us, showing McDowell spends the most, or according to their budget, is $1,541. Lincoln County is $1,111. Cleveland County is $1,001, and this is per registered voter, not the county population. Burke County is $954. Catawba is $931. I believe that's Wilkes up there. No, Caldwell is $858, and Rutherford is $778. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Kenny. Any questions for Kenny on this report? Seeing here none, this report will be on the agenda for our
Thank you for your
regular
time.
meeting. Thank you, Kenny. Item number 2, DSS monthly operation report from Corey Fisher-Wellman, our DSS director.
Good afternoon. I have a couple of things I'm going to go with you guys related to personnel and some foster parent numbers, and then our adult services supervisors are going to give you an overview of the services they provide. So just a little bit related to personnel. So we currently have, when this report was generated, we had 20 open full-time positions. Those 5 highlighted at the bottom are part-time, so that represents about a 10% vacancy rate, which is down considerably from where we were a couple months back. In the month of January, we had 7 total separations and 5 total hirings. I did check before I came over here, and in the month of February, we only had 2 separations and 10 hirings, so that's a much better, 8 more in than out, so that's a really good thing. So clearly moving in the right direction. There's a couple of those that are either in the interview process or have received conditional offers. Hopefully that number will continue to come down in the coming weeks. And then I just wanted to give a little bit, I know Commissioner Berry had asked a couple questions about foster parents and how many we have and that kind of thing. So just wanted to give you a little update, kind of where we are in terms of our foster parents. We currently have 17 homes in the county. We've recently lost 3 licensed homes. One of those was because we hired the licensed foster parents to be social workers. We can't have their license and be employees, so I guess that was a good thing, but it did cause us to lose 1 licensed home, so they'll transfer their license to another county, and then 2 families chose not to relicense. Of our 17 licensed homes, we have 12 who currently have placement. There's 5 families who don't currently have any children placed in their home. That can be for a variety of reasons. It could be result of things they have going on in their own life, or just not at a place where they're able to take children right now. But so that leaves 10 of our available 39 beds are open, but a majority of those are in the homes that are not currently accepting children. I'll go to this other slide first because it's kind of out of order. We have 2 training modalities we use to license foster parents. One is called the Model Approach to Partnerships and Parenting, which is you probably heard referred to as MAP class. That's the more common thing where families come in on a periodic level, go through a several week course, usually meeting 1 week at a time, and they're licensed that way. And then we also use another modality called Deciding Together, which is more of a one-on-one where a worker works with the family through that curriculum. So we currently have 5 families who have finished training and are waiting to be licensed, and then 2 families who chose not to move forward. Then we have, I think, in those 2 modalities, I think there's 5 families currently in MAP class, and then 2 currently working through Deciding Together. And this is just some events we've done in recent months to recruit new prospective foster parents. I think what we tell people about being a foster parent, there's all sorts of ways you can be a foster parent. It can be a lot to say, I want to take a 13-year-old in my house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but maybe you can provide respite for a family. So maybe you can have a kid in your house for the weekend to provide a break for those folks that have them all the time. So we encourage people to come to the informational sessions or to at least contact and talk through with our social workers about what if you can't do this, what might you be able to do. So we've done several events at churches and some community events. There's a Sound of Hope was a movie that is based on sort of the foster parent process. So we did a couple events with community partners related to the screening of that movie. Oh, sorry. And then we've tried to just make that last part is we have to create a diligent recruitment plan every year, submit it to the state. So we try to make, we have one social worker and one admin staff who are full-time committed to this job, but we try to make this a part of everyone's work. I mean, it's all of DSS's responsibility, adult services, economic services, social work, child welfare. So trying to make it a part of all the work we do in terms of recruiting and sharing information. So I'm happy to answer any questions about those two things, and then I'll let our adult services supervisors kind of talk through the work that they do.
All right. Thank you, Corey. Any questions for Corey on these items?
I just had a comment. Thank you guys a lot for reaching out to our church community. I think that's going to be key to helping you find foster parents, and the more you can do that, I think the better success you'll have. And I am curious how the visit from our North Carolina Secretary
Absolutely.
of DHHS.
So for those of you who don't know, the Secretary was in Burke County on Tuesday. He is new to his role. He's a medical doctor. He doesn't come from the world of social work. So I do think it's admirable of him to try to learn as much as he can and not to just send emails or read. Like he boots on the ground. He made a point to come out to Western North Carolina and visited several DSSs. We were one of them. He was only with us for about 45 minutes to an hour, but he asked questions and he seemed very interested in what we had to say. And he did, for the last 15 or 20 minutes, met with about 30, 40 of our staff, and he had a few things to say, and then he was willing to answer their questions. So, I don't expect life-changing things to come out of his visit, but I do very much appreciate, his willingness to come here and see us in person, so.
Anything else for Corey? All right.
So, this is Brett Porter and Cindy Potter, and they're going to talk through maybe their PowerPoint. There you go. All right. Which one wants to click? All right.
I'm Cindy Potter, and this is Brett Porter, and we do adult services. We have 6 units within our adult services unit, so I'll talk about the 3 that I manage, and then Brett can talk about his 3. I do CAP, which is the Community Alternatives Program, and SA In-Home, Adult Home Specialist Program, and Brett does the In-Home Aid Program, APS, and Guardianship. CAP is a Medicaid covered service. You have to be eligible for long-term care Medicaid to qualify for this service. It is a program that allows individuals to stay in their home versus going into a nursing facility. So we provide services for them or get them set up as far as the in-home aid in their home, a lifeline, home mobility aids, ramps, those kind of things, just to make sure that they're safely in their home. It's considered the same type of care as going into a facility, but they're in their home. You have to be 18 years or older, have long-term care Medicaid, and have a need for that program. And that's the services, just kind of like I went over, that we can provide on the program. We pay for adult day health. We pay for Lifeline, we pay for respite services, we pay for meals, just a lot of different programs. It's a really good program for the community. Oh yeah, sorry. We have 5 social workers that currently manage the CAP program. We have 151 clients that we currently serve. The state has allotted us, we can do up to 188. Because of different things that the state's kind of been through as far as processing those applications. That's why we're down only serving 151 currently, but we take referrals, multiple referrals weekly, and there is a large need in the community for that program. They're just kind of being backlogged at the state level before they send them to us to serve them.
What is, excuse me, what is the primary thing that keeps somebody from being able to be a part of the program? What are some of the qualifiers?
Medicaid is a big thing, having to apply for long-term care Medicaid. There's other things that they look at when they are applying for long-term care Medicaid, but the first main thing that I can get into things with people are your income. So when you come and apply for regular Medicaid, they look at household income. When you apply for CAP, they look at individual income. So a lot of people can't qualify for Medicaid because their household is too much. But sometimes, like say the husband and the wife need the service, the husband draws more than the wife can possibly get the service, but the husband can't, but the wife can because she's income eligible. They do look at assets and bank accounts and those kind of things, but as far as income, it's $1,255 a month is the max. And then you can qualify for the CAP program if you make more than that, but that gets into having a monthly deductible, which is a large monthly deductible. The state's actually working on doing those deductibles differently, because how they figure that now, say somebody draws $1,500 a month, which is over the $1,255, they take their monthly income, they minus $262, that amount they have left is what their monthly deductible is going to be that they have to incur every month. Well, people can't live on $262 a month a lot of times if they have household expenses, so that usually disqualifies them for the program.
Thank you.
You can contact me directly at Burke County DSS to make a CAP referral, or you can go through the state website and do that directly, either way. Another program that we manage is kind of similar but different is the Special Assistance In-Home. Special Assistance In-Home is a program that's a cash supplement program. So like if somebody is rest home level of care and the doctor recommends them to be rest home level of care and they qualify for long-term care Medicaid, they can apply for this cash supplement. And that gives them extra money each month to get things in their home, to stay in their home safely that they can't normally afford. Like say they need meals, say they need Lifeline or housekeeping or something that they're just not financially quite able to maintain to stay in their home. This gives them a little extra to be able to do those things. The state has made that an entitlement program. So as soon as, if you're eligible for long-term care Medicaid and you come in to apply and you want the SA In-Home program, we have to serve you. So there's no limit. There used to be a cap on that, but the past year the state's made where there's no cap on that. There's no limit. We currently have 50 adults on the SA In-Home program. We have one social worker that manages that full-time. So she's currently right now at 44 cases. So I've had to kind of remanage some caseloads and put some other workers doing that as well because that's unmanageable. And that's, like we've seen a large increase as of all counties around us since they've made it an entitlement program. You can apply for that program by coming in to DSS and applying for long-term care Medicaid and telling them that you want to, you're interested in the SA In-Home program. So once they come in to apply for long-term care Medicaid, they want the SA In-Home program, then they work up the paperwork and send it to our SA In-Home social worker, and she has 10 days to go out to assess them to get their services started to get them approved for the program. Another program that I manage is the Adult Home Specialist Program. They monitor and investigate complaints at assisted living facilities in Burke County. The Adult Home Specialists assist the state also with annual surveys, provide consultations to the facility. They also assist with placement when needed. There are currently 12 family care homes in Burke County, 6 adult care homes and 6 adult care homes. Family care homes are when you have 6 beds or less. Adult care homes is where it's more than 6 beds. We currently have 2 adult home specialists that monitors all these facilities. They have 9 apiece, and they also monitor the adult day health program, adult daycare program, which, by the way, opened back up today after being closed from the hurricane. So they manage other casework as well, but they do manage our facilities and assist the states. You can call our intake line at 764-9690 to make a complaint against a facility. We get complaints from residents, we get complaints from family members, people in the community that go visit a facility. So you can call directly to DSS to make a complaint, or you can call the state directly to make a complaint, then they will send it to us, and then the social worker that monitors that facility will go and investigate that complaint. Do y'all have any questions about my 3 programs?
Any questions on these? All right, thank you.
Hey.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Brett Porter, and I'm an adult service supervisor. I apologize. I have Bell's palsy in my face, so it affects my speaking a little bit and a little bit of awkwardness. So bear with me, please. But I manage the adult protective service side of things, guardianship, and in-home aid program. APS is Adult Protective Services. That's for adults who are alleged to be abused, neglected, or exploited. If people make reports, we screen those reports based on guidelines provided by the state. If it's screened in, we do an evaluation. If it's an evaluation, or if it's an allegation of abuse or neglect, our workers have 30 days to do that evaluation. If it's an allegation of exploitation, they have 45 days. They're given a little bit extra time because sometimes it takes a little longer to get financial records and stuff. So they give us a little extra time on those exploitation cases. But we work with families. We do those evaluations. We make referrals to the district attorney's office, law enforcement, and other regulatory agencies as needed. We initiate court action if needed to help protect the adults. That includes guardianship, which I'll talk about here in just a couple minutes. But if a report is confirmed, the allegations are confirmed, and substantiated a need for protective services, we offer services, and we can mobilize services to actually help folks. At that point, we can say, hey, we can help you apply for Medicaid, we can help you try to find housing, things like that. And adult protective services is regardless of income. We'll take reports on homeless people all the way to, bank presidents. It doesn't matter. So it's kind of a very widespread area. We have 3 primary social workers who work APS cases, but they each carry guardianship cases as well. To make an APS report, you can just call the main number, our intake line, which is 764-9690. That number rolls over to an on-call phone after hours and nights and weekends, and so that number is available 24/7. We used to have folks go through the comm center, the emergency communications center for the county, but in the last year or so, we have created a dedicated line where folks can just make those calls directly to us. So we do that. Again, as I mentioned, we do guardianship cases. That's for folks who are alleged to be incompetent or adjudicated incompetent by the courts. The statute, if DSS is named, the director is actually named as the legal guardian, and then we serve as his representatives in that. But as part of guardianship services, we assess an individual's need for guardianship. Folks will call in and, make a guardianship referral and say, I think my neighbor, needs some help. They don't have family, they don't have anybody that can help them in their later years. They can make that guardianship referral. We do an evaluation, and if we feel like they do in fact need a guardian, we try to determine who's the best to serve as that. I'll just mention at the very bottom there, DSS is the guardian of last resort by statute. We tell folks, family, friends, neighbors, your pastor, anybody that can assume that role, we have to explore that at least as an option. Sometimes folks just literally don't have anybody or anybody that's willing and able to serve in that role, and that's where the county, steps up to do that. We currently have, I think it's actually 57 adults under guardianship. We had one just passed away. And we have 17 contracted with Hope for the Future, which is a guardianship company in Asheville. We actually have 2 openings, so we have 15 with them now, but with 2 openings, and we have plans to, we've got a couple folks we think we're going to try to see if we can have modified to Hope for the Future in the near future. But I have 2 primary guardianship social workers. that's what they do. And then again, my APS folks each carry about 3 guardianship cases as well. Those referrals come through the court system, through APS reports or through guardianship referrals directly made to DSS. Anybody can go to the court here in Burke County and file a petition for guardianship or a motion for, or petition for incompetence. And they can either name themselves, they can name another person, or they can name Burke DSS as the recommended guardian. It goes in front of the clerk of court, and then they make a, through a legal hearing, and they make a decision as to who is best to serve in that role. But again, those guardianship referrals can also just come through that intake number, that 764-9690. And then the in-home aid program, it's another service that helps individuals who have functional, physical, or mental impairments accomplish their daily activities. There's different levels of in-home aid. We are just an in-home aid level 1, in-home aid level 1 program, which is supported by the State Home and Community Services Block Grant. Level 1, our in-home aid worker assists with basic home management tasks such as housekeeping, very light housekeeping, maybe helping them make a sandwich or something if they need to. We take folks, grocery shopping. They're on a regular schedule every week or every 2 weeks or once a month, depending on the individual and their needs. But we'll take them grocery shopping. We'll help them. We don't pay their bills, but we might help them, organize their bills and go through that. These folks are self-directing and medically stable. And it's, again, just for individuals whose needs can be met safely in the home with supports. And so we try to provide that. Again, I think the primary services we provide in that are groceries and transportation to medical appointments and things like that for folks who don't have any other options. We currently have 13 individuals. It's managed by one social worker who's kind of our catch-all. She does these and helps out with other things as well. And then we have one community services aide who actually goes out, and she's the one day to day, week to week, who goes out and provides these services for folks in person. That's basically a brief overview of adult services, both sides. So Cindy and I work great together, and we're happy to answer any other questions you folks might have.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions for these guys?
Good job.
Can't hear none. Thank you, appreciate what all you do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For our folks every day.
Thank you, sir.
Corey? All right, gentlemen, I'll need a motion to accept this information as the DSS report for this month.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept the report as presented.
All those in favor signify by the uplifted hand. 4-0. Again, thank you all for being here. Item 8 today, other discussions. I would remind you, if you have items to go to the clerk for our regular meeting agenda package, please get that to her. I have several courtesy reminders today, March the 6th and 7th. That's this week, gentlemen. Board of Commissioners Annual Budget Retreat at 8 o'clock a.m. at the NCSSM barn. For those that may be interested in attending from the public or otherwise, the NCSSM has asked us to be sure to provide some names so that they will have proper security. So if you plan to do that, please let the clerk know. Citizens must check in at the Goodwin Hall and follow the sidewalk over to the barn. It's about a quarter mile. So bring your walking shoes. March 17th, Board of Commissioners regular meeting at 6 o'clock. A reminder for youth groups to who might be interested in coming to our meetings and offering the Pledge of Allegiance. We would love for you to do that. Continue to remind you to use our animal services folks at the animal services facility, foster and adopt pets, and a reminder to take care of trash in our community and cover your loads. With that, I believe brings us to item number 10. Madam Clerk, we're going to be breakfast at the meetings on Thursday and Friday.
Yes, I would try to be there at 7:30 or 7:45, if you want to scarf it down before the meeting begins, or you can take it to your seat.
Okay. All right, so there'll be something for you to eat, gentlemen, at the meeting, so just keep that in mind. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'm having such a great time, I just don't know if I want to, but I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, all those in favor signify by the uplifted hand. 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Stroud. We will look forward to seeing you on Thursday and Friday, bright and early, 8 a.m.